This is episode 711 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Well, Wally, it's always good when the local media catch on to things that you've been talking about for a little while. And the latest example of that is a KOAT story, Channel 7, about the capital outlay process, the fact that $6 billion is sitting in accounts unspent, and some of the issues with the way that entire process works. I haven't, spent any further time really discussing it since we've talked about it on the show, but there is plenty of money laying around for capital outlay. And I think it's high time that the policymakers, especially the legislators and the governor, do something useful with that money, reallocating it preferably to critical infrastructure projects. I mentioned I-40 and expanding that to 3 lanes and repaving it all and re-engineering a lot of it. That'd be a big project. Another one that's been mentioned is Highway 54. I believe that's a U.S. Highway 54 out of Santa Rosa. It goes down to Tularosa and it goes up to the Texas Panhandle. It just so happens that in New Mexico, it's a 2-lane road. In other parts of the other states, Texas, Oklahoma, into Kansas, it's a relatively nice 4-lane road. Of course, then there's our lovely rest areas along our freeways, and there's I think safe to say a lot of capital outlay projects that anybody listening out there who especially drives around the state of New Mexico can say, yeah, we should do that. Not the 18th community center in a certain area or senior center, et cetera.
Well, yeah, or even worse than that are the thousands of partially funded projects that
Very
aren't
true.
will never are highly questionable to begin with, and I would certainly not say that all of them shouldn't be done, but of those that are on the books, a perpetually 25% funded project doesn't do anybody any good. Give the money back to the taxpayers, put it in the roads, do something with it. And Paul, this issue, I've been kind of aware of this issue off and on for going on 20 years. And about 10 years ago, there was a little bit of talk about doing something about it. But I do think that in New Mexico, this is a case of the political power that is vested in the legislators for being able to do it the way they do it, as opposed to actually benefiting the state, that is out of whack. And obviously, it's been a tough thing to correct because it's gone on a long time. But man, the numbers are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I remember when it was $1 billion and people started to talk about it, but now it's multiple billions.
Yeah, and it really is a process issue. There are, to be uh, completely clear, states that have figured this problem out. It generally looks something like a independent commission or some relatively politically insulated group that uh, offers a prioritization of the projects, and then there's the legislative process and the governor, and they get together and hopefully engage in allocating projects in ways that are based on some kind of process. We don't really have a process in New Mexico. It is just a grab bag, and it winds up resulting in a lack of prioritization. And as I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. While the oil and gas boom will likely continue in some way, shape, or form, whether revenues go up, as they did a few years ago, really dramatically, or revenues only go to a billion or billion and a half surplus annually, just, and of course that's after massive spending and massive putting money aside. Uh, the state of New Mexico will remain well funded for the foreseeable future, thanks to oil and gas. But if they are concerned in the legislature about the vagaries of those revenues, they can easily do some of these so-called one-time projects, putting aside more money available for capital projects and improving the lives and safety of not just New Mexicans but people who pass through this state on a regular basis, on a daily basis. So it's something that could easily be done, but hasn't been done. Kudos to KOAT for taking a look at this issue. Now, Wally, maybe a more fun, whimsical even article. I don't know. We can hash that out in a second. Uh, Good old NPR, taxpayer funded radio, had run a story that supposedly highlighted this trend. And it's always funny when, and I think it's safe to say, NPR is liberal. I know that that's going to shock a lot of people, but yes, NPR is biased towards the political left, and they decided just randomly to do a story focused on liberal Texans moving to New Mexico. And is this an accurate thing? Is this something that's really happening? The article is Blue Land of Enchantment Lures Unhappy Texans, May 20th, 2025. And it really highlights, this article does, some folks from Texas who have grown disenchanted primarily with the social policies, more socially conservative. They don't have legalized marijuana. They're not as thrilled with the transgender situation as New Mexico is, abortion, et cetera, the public abortion facilities. And NPR notes that according to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 2022 and 23, more Texans moved to New Mexico, almost 34,000, than from any other state. Now, I don't know if this is just another year, because Texas and New Mexico have a tremendous amount of overlap and flow between the two of them. And of course, if you look at it, Wally, as a retiree, throw ideology to the curb and you say, not that you're close to retirement or anything, but you already live in New Mexico. New Mexico looks rather attractive in certain contexts for retirees or close to retirees. And the people all pictured in this story look like they're in that vein. Now, the benefit is, of course, New Mexico has lower property taxes than Texas.
Right.
New Mexico is much more geographically scenic, more mountains, more unique geographical areas, and it's just better weather. And if you don't need a job, you're in pretty good shape in New Mexico as a retiree. But I think we can hash this thing out. NPR is kind of taking a one-sided approach to this particular story.
Yeah, I do think they're taking a one size approach, but also, Paul, if you go to some of the finer areas of Santa Fe, for example, some of the richer areas that maybe have a golf course or two associated with them, and talk to the residents of those communities, a lot of them are executives from Texas. A lot of them in the oil and gas industry, a lot in other industries. So yeah, there's a lot of Texans that like to live in Santa Fe. You have the mountains; it's a lot cooler. You maybe have other homes to begin
Yep.
with, but yeah, who are these people? We don't know, and they didn't. I don't think NPR even had their obligatory. On the other hand, a lot of New Mexicans left New Mexico during the COVID years and went to Texas. Or did they even ask the question? I guess that's the key. So I doubt it. And you're getting old when you can remember back to when you listened to NPR. I used to listen to it in the morning, and to show how far back. You had Larry Aarons on KOB, and you had NPR, and I would listen to both of those back in the day because NPR has always been liberal, but in their earlier iterations, they did actually relatively good reporting to where even if they reported on an issue with a slant, the other side would get in there sometimes. You could actually not a bad source. And this is uh, getting old now. There once was a time, Paul, when we didn't have the internet, so it was like radio was it. But now I listen to NPR and I just shake my head. I do it. I don't know. Every 6 months, I'll listen to it if I'm driving around, and it's like, uh, you know what? I don't need to be given one side of every story. There are plenty of options for that, and NPR is not needed to be one of them.
Yeah, continuing a little bit further with this story, um, it is kind of a man bites dog uh, situation here, in the fact that maybe a subgroup, a certain limited number of people from Texas are moving to New Mexico. But the broader trend is much more favorable towards Texas receiving larger numbers of people. Now, whether those are coming from New Mexico or not, it's a different story. Part of this issue is statistically, you just have a lot more Texans. So if a Texan moves uh, and they move to an adjacent state, well, New Mexico is going to be a relatively large recipient of that group of people, especially since, like I said, while New Mexico is much slower growing population wise, overall less attractive as a destination for business and economic activity than Texas, from a certain perspective of retirees, and especially those on the political left who happen to like good weather and mountains. Who doesn't? Uh, then you're going to see some level of movement from Texas to New Mexico. But when over the last 2010 to 2020 decade, Texas grew 16%, and New Mexico grew 3% ish. And of course, Texas being a much, much bigger state already. So that percentage is even a little bit deceiving because you're having to grow so much more to make Texas's population grow that dramatically. Uh, it's really a non-story. Now, just once in my life, Wally, I would like to see a story from NPR. I'm willing to even expand this out to other media outlets. Do, breaking news. Census Bureau data shows Americans moving to low tax, more free states. Now, what are the chances of that happening? Let alone NPR, but throw CBS, ABC, NBC News, top of the hour. This is the big story we're talking about. I think not.
Well, and it's back to your dog bites man. They're
Yeah.
like, what can we say positive about New Mexico? Oh, here's a little tidbit. And Paul, you put it in good context. That what my thought is like, yeah, Texas is growing leaps and bounds. New Mexico is not. We are barely hanging on to population. The other thing is the last I looked, we are getting older too. So we're losing our younger, our more educated, our more mobile people that are actually really the ones that are really important for building an economy and sustaining an economy. And guess what? The sustaining and growing of an economy in a state is a huge part of its success, and not doing as well in that regard. So, yeah, this is good. I'm glad we got one up on Texas. Believe me, New Mexicans always like it when we can beat Texas. But but as you said, I don't think Texas is quaking in its boots on that. And it is interesting. 34,000, that's a lot. You know what I mean? Given a state like ours is growing so slowly, that actually hits the radar. Where if it was going the other way, no one would even notice it. It would be a rounding error.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, there are some choice lines from this article. And so this is the portion where I would consider laughter an appropriate response. So these are direct quotes from the NPR story. This woman says, I look at New Mexico, which is a poor rural state. Sorry, I'm going to get teary, says his partner, Stephanie Bonzek, a family nurse practitioner, choking up a bit. But they keep trying to do the right thing. Yes, That's classic stuff right there.
I know I'm moving to an economic hellhole, but one of these days they're going to do better.
Yes, someday leftist policy will work. I know it's
It
uh,
just hasn't been done properly. We know that.
so. Here's from our own lovely governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham. People are seeking out states in the West where the skies are incredibly blue, says Grisham, 65. That's if you talk to the governor. Remember during COVID when it was Lujan Grisham? How
Yeah.
dare you? Anyway, NPR, I think they get a pass. In an interview from her Santa Fe office, we've got 4 seasons, friendly people, free college, free universal pre-K, and we're going to be a safe haven for reproductive health for women and their families all across America. Man, she just sold me. That's some good stuff. But yeah, go check it all out, and then of course understand that the numbers show that not only in percentage terms, but in real numbers, which of course percentage terms are going to be skewed somewhat based on the fact that Texas already has a massive population and New Mexico's much smaller. It is kind of funny, but it's the kind of story that just once I would love to see a story, maybe a dog bites man story, where they talk about how people like economic freedom and individual liberty. And bad COVID policies are a reason to move. I don't know, something
Yeah.
wild and crazy like that. But uh, on a separate related note, so I could do a story every week about this guy, this columnist, Milan Simonich from the Santa Fe New Mexican. And, you can certainly, and people are out there listening, have their own critiques of the Republican Party in New Mexico. But Milan Simonich really loves to just critique the Republicans in New Mexico for their lack of success. And again, not saying that the Republican Party nationally in New Mexico, et cetera, couldn't do something better or have done something better over the years. But, New Mexico's been a pretty blue state for 100 years. And it's not like the current Republican crop is somehow markedly more or less competent than they were in the 1950s or 60s or 70s or 80s or 90s. And there's been periods of Republican rule at some level, but not total control of the state government. So Simonich wrote about the issue of corruption and how that has stagnated New Mexico. And it's hard for me to disagree because Milan Simonich is way off base so often in his blaming corruption. He's almost one step. He's just one step from saying that the Democrats are corrupt in New Mexico, but he doesn't come right out and say it. Of course, he's writing in the Santa Fe New Mexican.
Those who are in charge in New Mexico.
Yes, and there of course are Republican issues that we've seen. Some elected Republicans have not always done the right thing in office, but obviously the state is heavily governed by Democrats. But my actual point is that I believe in the chicken or the egg battle of, is corruption the cause of not succeeding, or economic freedom? Is that the cause, and that the corruption derives from, you put the honey out and the bear comes and gets it, right? So our reports with the Fraser Institute, with Matthew Mitchell, and the highlighting that they do, the fact that free market oriented societies are less corrupt. So I would rather wave a magic wand and make New Mexico a free market place with a very small, limited government than to eliminate corruption and keep the government the same basic size, because I think inevitably, when you have the size of government we do, influencing and penetrating all areas of the state and its economy, you're going to create the corruption issues that cause so many problems.
Yeah, when I thought of this issue, Mr. Willie Sutton, famous bank robber, said when asked, "Why do you rob banks?" Because that's where the money is, and that's what happens in places like New Mexico, and actually more and more at the federal level too. You have all these programs where we're gonna we're going to provide funding for this and funding for that and grants and all of these incentives to do things. And then, yeah, sometimes some people act shocked that, oh my goodness, there's fraud, waste, and abuse in these. It's like it's almost made for fraud, waste, and abuse sometimes. And so, and then New Mexico is starting to get more into that business as well in terms of providing more and more economic incentives for things. And I guess where did it start? Uh, I think it started with, the pre-territorial days of New Mexico, but I think recently one of the one of the big ones is the film industry subsidies. It's like, oh, if you have enough friends and make enough friends in New Mexico, the sky's the limit in terms of what money you can get out of the government, whether it be legal, illegal, ethical, or unethical. And because we're flush with cash. Uh, if we weren't, there's no money to steal, but there's a lot of money to steal from the government in New Mexico right now.
Yeah, and there are cultural challenges. There are all kinds of issues, but the fact is that across the globe, across history, the countries that have less political corruption also have a more market-based economy. It's simple. If you are at Walmart or a mom and pop business, doesn't really matter. If you start doing things incorrectly with your company's money, you tend to either get caught or the business tends to go under. Government, I don't know how many times we have seen corruption over the years, but it happens quite a bit. I mean, look at the APD DUI conviction, sale approach. I mean, that was in going on for decades and decades. That kind of thing would likely sink a business, especially a moderate to small one. And of course, there's a lot more accountability in the private sector because you have to turn a profit. You have to use those dollars in a more effective way. In government, it's just another day at the office. So, given the choice, give me limited government.
Yeah, and then one final point, Paul, is if you look at New Mexico's history of corruption, the corruption that has been caught, the Manny Aragon,
Right.
Cheryl William Stapleton, all of those, unless you're assuming that they're the only people that have ever done corruption and they've been caught, this is in all likelihood, if it's based on every other kind of crime in New Mexico, there's probably a whole lot of crime out there that hasn't been caught, hasn't been reported on, but exists nonetheless. And again, just common sense and common sense would indicate that maybe we have just found the tip of the iceberg on some of these public cases.
Yeah, I think that's probably correct. The un, undocumented cases of corruption, as you might call them. Um, Moving on, this week, the New Mexico Environment Department noted that the proposed clean transportation fuel program is being sent to the state's Environmental Improvement Board. Now, we're going to talk about EVs in a second, but this bill was actually passed HB 41 in March of 2024 during the 30-day session that year. That clean fuel standard is the same one that many Republicans kind of, I think, conflated or used the term 50-cent gas tax, 50 cent a gallon gas tax to highlight the problems with this particular plan. And we did a report using statistical modeling based on Oregon and the way gas prices increase there as the CO2 content of fuels dropped. But basically, we're looking at prices going up by as much as 30 cents a gallon by 2030. So it's not a tax, though. It's not going to generate any revenue for the state of New Mexico. This is purely a regulatory price increase thanks to this legislation that passed in 2024. So the upshot is this is heading to the EIB. They will have meetings September 29th, 2025 to October 17th, 2025. So currently the gas price is driven by, all existing regulations and market forces, not this mandate that has yet to be completely implemented. But I would expect that come January of 2026, we might see that regulation finalized and the price start to incrementally and over time creep up and up.
Yeah, I think it's very likely that will be the case. And, look to the place where these sorts of initiatives have been developed, which is California, and say what is the price of gasoline in California relative to the rest of the Western United States, and without question, between all the taxes they have, which are higher than ours, as well as all the regulations they have, which, as you point out, it makes the price go up, but the government doesn't get it. It just requires the creation of a more expensive product. Yeah, think we will. I think we will see that, Paul. I don't think there's any question that it won't cause a rise, but how it's formulated, it won't be readily apparent where it comes from, and it won't happen all at one time. And so we'll be like the frog in the pot of water. It's cold when they threw us in, and they turn on the heat, and sooner or later it'll be boiling, and we'll look back a couple years to say, oh yeah, this could be raising our prices more than surrounding states that don't have this.
Yeah, and to answer your question, gasoline in the state of California, as we talk on May 27th, 2025, $4.85, according to AAA. Oregon, which also has this regulation in place, is right at $4. Washington's $4.41. So California is definitely a state that you get a little more pain at the pump. Uh, Real quick note on this, something I thought was very interesting is this regulation has what I consider to be a fatal flaw. And I went through it and wrote this in the Heirs of Enchantment post on the topic. On page 86 of the document produced relating to this regulation, uh, the New Mexico Environment Department claims carbon intensity and lifetime emissions of electricity at zero. Zero electricity emissions being for, of course, electric vehicles under this proposed regulation. So if you buy an EV, you are not generating any emissions, according to this. Now, yes, currently our utilities still use a mix of coal and natural gas alongside renewables. That is supposed to, in theory, change when they go 100% renewable under state law in 2045. But we are a long way from 2045. I take issue with this regulation from that particular standpoint because uh, even if you just assume that we're only talking about the fuel input, not the manufacture of the vehicle or the manufacture of the wind turbine or the power lines that have to go up and all the other things relating to that do take CO2 emissions or do require them. I find it really interesting that they're just kind of, yeah, we're claiming zero emissions here.
Yeah, and then Paul, first of all, the fact is, yes, they totally ignore the manufacture of anything that's green. So, notwithstanding the fact that the green tech revolution requires a heck of a lot of mining, a heck of a lot of materials, tons of energy to do it, to the point where if you don't get enough utilization of wind or solar or battery, it could be a net negative from carbon relative to sources like using natural gas. So, yeah, it's like we're going. And this is one of those. This is aspirational because that's what we want it to be. That's what we're going to assume it is, and Need to put your pencils or close your spreadsheets. Nothing else to see here.
Yeah, I mean, it is factual at this point that CO2 emissions are, uh, happening even from electric vehicles. This is not a completely clean form of energy, but
And there
that's
is
the way
no
it goes.
completely clean form of energy. There never has been, and there never will be. We know that. I mean,
Right, and
it's
that's part of the other problem is that there are other uh, issues, environmentally speaking, that relate to the construction of EVs and, of course, their batteries and the generation of the electricity that goes into them and the transportation and this, that, and the other, and the batteries that have to back up the grid. But we're just going to ignore all that, uh, not just the, they're going to ignore all of it. Let's put it that way. All right.
Yeah, and just a quick
No
thought
problem.
experiment. What would happen if you needed, all the lithium and all of the rare earth minerals and all the things necessary to do wind and solar and batteries, but that was required for, say, natural gas power plants? There'd be a study a week about the life cycle. Look at all, in addition to burning fossil fuel, look how much it costs to create this, and that makes it even worse. But that's just they have an admirable lack of curiosity on that point when they do these articles and do these regulations.
Exactly. All right. Well, staying in the same general field, uh, it is good news that this week the U.S. Senate, on a somewhat bipartisan vote, not as many as the 35 members of the House that voted to overturn California's exemption from rules on vehicle emissions that have led to them attempting to abolish the gas powered internal combustion engine by 2035. But the U.S. Senate joined the House of re, re, yeah, Representatives recently in repealing that particular exemption that California had that led to New Mexico and other blue states adopting similar EV mandates. And this is sitting on President Trump's desk. I'm confident that he'll sign it very quickly this week. And it's very, very good news because, as I see it, New Mexico's EV mandate will be overturned thanks to this federal regulation because you can't follow California if California can't have an exemption. Uh, Now, there's other ways to skin that cat proverbially, but the fact is that New Mexico was piggybacking on California, and California's exemption is now going into the dustbin of history.
Yeah, and it will be very interesting to see what New Mexico will do. Will the New Mexico Environment Department try a rulemaking on its own accord, like it does on other things, to try to do this? The other thing I think there's a fair amount of chance happening is we're just going to ignore that California went away, and we're going to base our regulation on what the rule used to be because that's where we did it. So there's a there's a lot of, I do think, political maneuvering that will happen, and I don't think that any course of action predicting that from the government and the bureaucracy in New Mexico is difficult to do under any circumstances. But yeah, I think that is not the last we've heard of this. Even though I think you're right, Paul, that the issue is probably largely resolved. They have to do something else, but what will that be and how?
Yeah, well, I think the way this is going to work out, at least for the foreseeable future, is that indeed California's EV mandate is done, as is New Mexico's. There will be litigation from the state of California over this issue. I don't see that succeeding. I'm not a lawyer, but uh, a lot of what Trump has done has been through the executive order, where there are limits on that. This is congressional action, and I find it hard to see how a judge can step in and say, "Oh, Congress can't do this." That's a different, situation entirely. And I don't know long term what will happen if I was to say fairness. Here's fairness. California can have an exemption, a science based policy in place to make sure that they never have smog again. Maybe that is the federal regulation and that just holds because we have seen cleaner and cleaner automobiles and higher standards in the Clean Air Act and other policies that have come down from the federal government that by themselves would make LA and the smog situation much more tolerable. Perhaps they give California some leeway on that, but once you give California leeway, then you're setting in motion potentially major changes that the automakers have to make to all of all aspects of constructing a vehicle because California's one out of every 8 Americans, give or take, and California has tremendous market power. So uh, I don't think any reasonable scenario moving forward that other states should be able to just kind of glom on to California's exemption and make policy that way. That was always a bad decision and something that should have never been done.
And Paul, what do you think about what do you think this does to the requirements on car dealers? Do you think that that goes away with this California thing, or is that separate and apart enough that it might, New Mexico might get stubborn and still try to keep that going? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think there's a leg to stand on for uh, them to regulate car dealers.
Hmm.
This governor could try some funny business, but litigation is not free. And even though Raul Torres certainly has shown a propensity to take up the litigation against the federal government and the Trump administration at the drop of a hat, I think he's going to fight a losing battle here, and I think he's going to just let California go ahead and address this issue via their own lawsuits. And the governor can at least say, "Well, hey, we didn't get to uh, more than 5%. We didn't get to 43% as we wanted to do, but we got something." And she'll try to spin it as a positive, even though it's obviously a huge defeat for her and the radical environmental group. So that is good news. A little bit of good news for a change. Yeah. Uh, so moving on, a couple of events coming up. One is I'll be in Santa Fe this Friday, May 30th. You can sign up if you're in Santa Fe or headed to Santa Fe on Friday. It's information at heirsofenchantment.com. Rod Montoya, representative in the state of New Mexico's legislature, myself, local business owners, will be talking about the big, beautiful bill, Trump's tax cuts, Pranzo Italian Grill in Santa Fe. Again, this is Friday evening. You'll have wine, hors d'oeuvres, and the panel discussion. So you can enjoy a Friday evening talking taxes with us. I guess the wine might help grease the skids there a little bit, but that bill obviously passed the U.S. House on a narrow margin, and now it's on to the Senate, and probably some changes, which will also require reconciliation with the House passed version. So we're still a long way from the finish line on that bill, but there was a victory this week with the narrow passage in the House on the big, beautiful bill. We'll talk about the pluses and minuses for businesses, some of the things that we would have liked to have seen perhaps in that piece of legislation, other aspects of what's going on in Washington there. One other event, June 18th, our friend Matt Mitchell, who co-authored the policy brief on the decline of economic freedom in New Mexico, is speaking at a luncheon event at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center in Albuquerque. Again, June 18th. It's a Wednesday. Tickets are available at the Rio Grande Foundation.org event page, as well as heirsofenchantment.com. And emails are being distributed as we speak to promote this particular event. Uh, this is really at the core of what the Rio Grande Foundation does. Matt Mitchell works on economic freedom issues here in New Mexico, across the country, and for a Canadian think tank. So he's interested in Canadian politics as well. And I encourage you to come out and see what Mr. Mitchell has to say about these important issues, these issues that hold New Mexico back, unfortunately.
Yeah, Paul, it's exciting. He's here. The report is very good, and hear his anecdotes from a citizen of our 51st state of Canada. So,
Well, he's actually
oh no,
in
he's
New
a New
Mexico.
Mexican. That's right.
Yes, but
No, but the Frasers from Canada.
yeah, Fraser Institute is a Canadian-based organization. And I'll mention this just kind of at the end here. There are some really entertaining and well done YouTube videos by a guy named Nick Johnson. You can go find him on YouTube. Uh, One of the more recent ones, he's done a whole series in New Mexico and spent a lot of time here, and quite frankly knows New Mexico pretty well. This is a 45-minute YouTube video, so it's basically an hour long equivalent of a TV show. And he's done one on the war zone, neighborhood of Albuquerque. He's done other videos about New Mexico, and I haven't watched them all, but I'll tell you what, my wife and I sat down and watched the video Santa Fe, the snobby capital where liberals bought every single house, and we could not stop laughing. It was quite entertaining, and done from a position of both love and some mocking.
Yeah, I guess almost in the Tosh.0 style of humor, where he can make fun of something, where he shows he has some positive feelings for it, but there are a lot of zingers. I haven't seen it all, but Paul, you showed me part of it, and yeah, he makes some very interesting points that I don't think that the video will probably end up being on the Santa Fe tourism website, but it is. Pretty interesting. And then just real quickly on his Warzone video, there were a lot of people that said he cherry picked, it was kind of like poverty porn and he did it really disingenuously. And I would say on that one, I watched that whole, what he said is, oh my God, look at that. Look at what's going on here. And those areas that he was reporting on were ones I drive by. And guess what I say? Oh my God, what is going on here? And so I think of really probably the furthest thing from that. And so there's more truth to this Santa Fe video than some people might like to admit, but it is good clean fun. Let's put it that way. They
Yeah,
won't
and
they won't view it that way, but
I reached out, and I'm going to try to get this gentleman on the podcast. I would love it. He's a pretty busy guy, though. You can look at his YouTube page and the number of videos he's done all over the country, and it's quite fascinating. But that's where we're going to leave it now. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.